everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mikey Reacts. Today we've got a good one. This is a sequel to the deaths of World War II, and this is, I think, theoretical as opposed to factual, and it is the estimated deaths in the nuclear war. So this is a video that estimates the deaths in a nuclear war, if a nuclear war were ever to happen. And I really hope that is not really something we have to think about. I really pray that is not the case, because that would be absolutely disastrous and horrible. But I'm excited to see just what the theory is. And I'm predicting that it's going to be quite horrendous, more than we could possibly imagine. So let's just pray for a second and hope that is never, ever going to be a reality. So let's get to it in just a second. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy it, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new content. And check down below on for my Patreon in the description, and my Instagram and Twitter. You can see more exclusive content on Patreon. I'll be posting 2 to 3 videos per week, and it's more exclusive historical and political content that hopefully you guys will enjoy. So let's get to this, and let's hope that after watching it, I'm still able to sleep at night. It's not something that I've ever really been scared of as a possibility. It is what it is. Let's see what they have to say. Okay, shadow piece. It's not dirty water, by the way. Some apple and pear cordial.
Every second, on average, 4.6 people are born into the world.
Nice.
That's 140 million births a year.
Wow.
There are currently over 7 billion people alive today.
Closer to 9 now.
Humans are dying at less than half the rate we're being born. About 2 die every second, which is 60 million deaths a year. And the difference between the birth rate and the death rate tells us how fast the world's population is growing. We're gaining about 2.5 people per second, or 83 million a year. And as for those who are no longer living, the Population Reference Bureau came up with 108 billion for the total number of humans who have ever lived and died on Earth.
Wow.
They used 50,000 years ago as the start date for Homo sapiens. Now let's arrange the sand into groups of 1 million people. 7 billion is 7,000 millions. And then arrange the living by their age. Doing so creates what's called a population pyramid, though it's usually shown the other way around and separated by gender. We'll want to keep the oldest sand on the bottom. We'll arrange the dead based on how long ago they died. The spike in deaths during World War II is visible even at this scale.
Wow.
Because it all happened in just 6 years, no other war we know of could leave such a dramatic scar on our living record. No wars so far. A nuclear war, especially one that erupted late in the Cold War, could have been much worse.
Yeah.
You can pause to explore the stories behind these so-called close calls.
Whoever made this is doing a very good job.
Some were closer than others, but it's hard to know how close we came or how many people would have died. One way to study World War III casualties is to first look at what atomic weapons did to people in Japan in 1945.
Okay, yeah.
And then scale up.
Oh yeah, definitely.
About a third of the population of both cities were killed. 90% of deaths occurred within the first 3 weeks. While long-term effects of radiation, such as cancer, killed thousands across decades, it accounted for a small portion of the victims.
Yeah.
And on the other end, only a minority of those who died were killed instantly from the blast. Most deaths occurred between the first few hours and the first few weeks due to burns, blast injuries, collapsed structures, and radiation sickness.
Yeah.
A broad term that describes a whole array of terrible symptoms, and a slow killer. Even those with high exposure didn't die for 5 to 6 days.
Wow.
The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were small by today's standards. The hydrogen bombs developed years later have 10 times the radius of destruction.
Jesus.
But it's not the size of the bombs that makes calculating World War III deaths so daunting.
The size of the cities and the population density. Like New York is 9 million people, so is London.
It's the number of warheads in play.
Oh, okay. Terrifying. I guess you want to live in Nevada, right? Is that Nevada? You want to live in Nevada or like Oklahoma? Oh, this is scary. Yeah, I'd be dead. South of France and Spain seem right. Wow, this is the map leaked. My God, Germany would be gone. And the UK would be gone too. I guess, guys, that shows that the Russians perceive us, Brits, and you Americans, and of course the Germans for some reason, because of their economic power, as the biggest threats. So you can either be scared of that or you can be proud of that and think to yourself, damn, you know, like, that's how strong and powerful we are as nations. Like a small country like the UK will get bombed so much because they're so scared of our capability that you know. But saying that, you might want to live in Scotland or up in or Ireland maybe. Oh, United States target list, 1956. Jesus. Declassified in 2015.
The death count for the first 3 weeks of a nuclear war would depend on how many warheads launched and how many successfully hit their targets. If we went with a round number on the high end, let's look at what 500 million deaths would look like. Almost 10 World War IIs in 3 weeks. Then something would have occurred that didn't happen in Japan. Because the bombs would have been so much larger, and because many would have targeted underground missile silos, scientists believe the explosions would have propelled enough dust and ash into the atmosphere to block out much of the Earth's sunlight. The radioactive fallout would have been deadly for a week or two, but the darkness and freezing temperatures could have decimated agriculture and food supplies for many years.
Jeez.
We won't even see the guess at what a nuclear winter or nuclear famine would have done to the world's population. With so much uncertainty, most scientists won't even throw out a number.
Yeah.
So we'll have to end our count there, at just 3 weeks into the nightmare. Contrary to a popular notion, even a full-scale nuclear war is unlikely to wipe out the human race.
Okay.
As the number of warheads increased during the arms race, so did the death count in a worst-case scenario. Since the Soviet Union collapsed, the number of bombs has been coming down. While there isn't a direct relationship between the number of warheads and the number of deaths, nuclear disarmament has reduced the potential human cost of a nuclear war in a very real way. But there are still enough bombs today to kill hundreds of millions of people, and more than enough to create the conditions of a nuclear winter. Today, there are 9 countries who have nuclear weapons. This number has not increased for decades. South Africa was once on the list, but they shut their program down.
Yeah.
the vast majority of countries in the world have decided not to go nuclear. A possible, partial explanation for this is that the United States and other countries have worked to keep this number down. Countries like North Korea and Iran get a lot of news coverage, but the US has also worked to disincentivize allies from getting the bomb, using such tools as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and nuclear alliances. Under the rules of NATO, for example, the nuclear members provide deterrence for everyone else, which means, in theory, each country doesn't need its own bomb. The US provides similar protection to allies outside of NATO, including Japan, South Korea, and Australia.
Okay.
In addition to disarmament and non-proliferation, there are other steps that may further reduce the risk of a nuclear war, such as a no first strike policy. Many of these ideas are controversial, and some may be unwise. You can pause to learn more about their pros and cons. Even without taking most of these steps, many foreign policy experts will say that the risk of a full-scale war is less today than it was at the height of the Cold War, though it is certainly not at zero.
Yeah.
Some believe the risk has grown. It certainly could grow if people become less scared of nuclear war and less steadfast in efforts to prevent it. Experts will also point out that improving relationships between countries is just as important, if not more so, than policies specific to nuclear weapons, which is important to consider when assessing something as complicated as NATO.
Oh yeah. That would be absolutely ridiculous if that
There's no
happened, guys.
simple
Absolutely
answer for
ridiculous.
achieving peace, but there is a simple hope. If we're clever enough to design such sophisticated weapons, we might also be clever enough to ensure we never use them.
No, I disagree. I don't think that's.
Now, our weapons
I
are
hope so.
undeniably powerful. They dazzle us and remind us of our human potential.
It's true.
Instruments for preventing war are usually mundane, and if powerful, they tend to go unnoticed. If taking one of these steps prevented a catastrophe, we'd probably never know it.
That's true. That's true.
And that's what makes it so hard to prove what works in preventing war. But sometimes, when there's enough data available, you can see patterns emerge from the numbers. As an example, let's take a rare category of peacemaking that's actually tangible and exciting. Peacekeepers. Men and women who go into conflict areas to help prevent war from occurring or reoccurring. During the Cold War, the aim of peacekeepers was primarily to prevent a nuclear war.
Okay.
And after 1989, a new era in peacekeeping emerged. Missions became more focused on civil wars and more directly involved in the peace process. But does it work? Paige Fortna, a researcher at Columbia University, analyzed 94 cases after 1989, where there's a civil war followed by a spell of peace. Sometimes the fighting ended when one side defeated the other.
Okay.
Other ceasefires were more tenuous. And the peace that followed ranged from brief pauses in the fighting to decades of peace still holding today.
Okay.
In 36 of these cases, peacekeepers were present during the peaceful period.
Okay.
And they were not always successful. Sometimes war returned despite their efforts.
Yeah, it's hard to be successful in all these
Opponents
situations,
point to
isn't it?
these failures as evidence that peacekeeping does not work.
That's not true.
And at a glance, it's not obvious that it does. Fortner ran statistical analysis to find out what factors predicted longer spans of peace. First, note that her
Prosperity.
findings on factors outside of peacekeeping were pretty consistent with other studies. You can pause to learn more. Fortna found that peacekeeping had a significant effect on the staying power of peace. War was about a quarter as likely to reoccur when peacekeepers were present.
That's interesting.
Even with the small sample size, she could claim with confidence that post-Cold War peacekeeping correlated with longer peace. Despite such findings, many policymakers remain unconvinced, and the general public, in the US anyway, shows little enthusiasm for supporting peacekeeping missions.
Yeah, I kind of understand where they're coming from to a
While
certain
few would ever
extent.
question the scientific methods used to develop our weapons, many are skeptical about statistics and the science of less tangible things like peace.
Yeah.
And such doubts help fuel the argument that the only real instruments of peace are instruments of war.
Do you know what? I kind of agree with that to a certain extent, because no one's going to invade the United States. You know? Think about it.
That peace can only be achieved by fortifying borders, strengthening armies, and winning arms races.
I guess I
That
think that's
nuclear
kind of
weapons
true.
are the reason there has not been a major war since World War II.
That might be a genuine
There's truth to many such theories.
factor.
But I should tell you up front that this filmmaker believes in instruments of peace. That they are real, that they are powerful, and that you can see them working if you're willing to look at the numbers. And in this series, we'll aim to bring peacemaking efforts into light with all the drama they deserve.
Okay. I
To
respect
learn
that.
about future episodes and how you can support this audience-funded series,
I respect that view. I think, in my personal opinion, I think the temperament of man hasn't changed, but simply our ability to destruct has improved. I don't think we are any less warmongering than we were 3,000-4,000 years ago. I just think we've gotten better at it. And, you know, I think there are less wars because we're so good at killing each other, to be honest with you. Everyone understands now the cost, especially after the first and Second World War. Everyone now understands the costs of going to war with such incredible technology. So I think war is less likely to occur because of that. But of course, you see what happened now in Eastern Europe. It is proof that war can and will occur without the use of nuclear weapons. Everyone kept saying for years and years, oh, you know, if Russia were to invade Europe, then, you know, there would be all-out war, nuclear war. Well, Russia invaded Europe and no nuclear war has happened. So, I mean, let's see what happens. I'm not saying that I'm saying that with an optimistic, from an optimistic point of view. I don't believe there will be a nuclear war, and I hope there won't be a nuclear war as well, and I pray for that also. But that was really, really eye-opening. Look at how many people would die in the first strikes, and the amount of strike targets that there were, both on the US side and the Russian side, is staggering and terrifying. The UK would be gone. The only saving grace of the United States is that it's so spread out and large that if you were living somewhere like Oklahoma, maybe Nevada, or out in the sticks, you might just be okay. But, you know, there's a lot to consider there. The UK was basically gone, aside from Scotland, which the population up north is pretty much non-existent, which is why there seem to be like near to no strikes zones there. China would be gone, especially with its dense population. But geez, that was something else. Thank you so much, guys, for recommending this. It was really, really, really eye-opening. I hope you learned something as well as I did watching this. Really interesting. This guy does really great stuff, and the way he does his videos is really, really nicely laid out. His voice, he speaks very nicely and very clearly, and the graphics are really fantastic. So I really, really enjoyed this video. It's a bit somber, a bit scary, but I don't believe that there will be one. And I do believe to a certain extent that instruments of war are great deterrents. Like I said, no one's going to mess with the United States when you have fighter planes like the F-22 and the F-35 and the world's largest fleet, most advanced fleet. You know, that is a deterrent, and that is if the US was weak, like really weak, if the US had no military, do you not think China would have invaded it by now? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's anyone else going to do? But there's arguments for both sides. Anyway, I really enjoyed that video. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter in the description. Leave comments of any recommendations and let me know what you thought of this video. You guys are absolutely amazing. Have a great day.